Hello, welcome to the Sweet Sparrow Knits podcast. This is a podcast about knitting, sewing, spinning, yarn dyeing, any sort of craft that I can get into. So this episode is going to be a slightly different format than usual. I have been a very monogamous knitter lately, so I reached out on Instagram and asked you guys to send in some questions that you would like answered. I should tell you where to find me. You can find me as Sweet Sparrow Knits on Instagram and Ravelry, and you can find my hand-dyed yarn and my project bags at sweetsparrowyarns.etsy.com. I have a Ravelry group for the podcast as well, but to be totally honest, I haven't really kept up with it. I would like to start doing that again more now that things are calming down a little bit, but yeah, if you're looking to get in touch with me about something not order related or not shop related, Instagram direct message is definitely the best way to do that because I check that a lot more than I check my Ravelry messages. You might notice that I'm a little glowy today. It's extremely warm in my apartment. The heat is just going and going. I am getting it fixed next week, so hopefully in the future I won't look quite so subtropical. But for now, it is what it is. Because it's so warm in here, I am not drinking tea this week. I am just drinking water, but I'm drinking it out of one of my favorite mugs. This is a sweet little pink speckled egg mug that I purchased at the Naples, Florida Botanical Garden, where I went with my aunt and my brother, I think 2 years ago. It was really great. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous botanical garden, and it's much more interactive than some botanical gardens. There are hammocks to lay in. It's really wonderful. If you are in the Naples, Florida area, I completely recommend it. Before we move on to knitting content and to questions and answers, because this is a question that I've received a lot, I just wanted to mention that Sweet Sparrow Yarns 2018 Advent calendars will be going into the shop. The first batch of 50 spaces will be available on Monday, April 2nd at noon Eastern Time. And then I will have another batch available in May and then another batch available in July. So this batch will be 50 spots, and then the next, what's happening here? Okay. And then the next two will be 25 each. So there will be a total of 100 Advent calendars available for purchase. I spread out the availability so that hopefully everyone who would like one can figure out a timing that works for your financial schedule. I know we can't necessarily always just drop everything to pay for a yarn purchase. We need to have a little bit of time to work it into our budget, and that's completely fine, and hopefully there's a time spot that works for you to get your Advent calendar. They will ship out at the end of October, and you will have them in plenty of time to open your first package on December 1st. Okay, whoo, so hot. Dignified. That's why you come to this podcast. Okay, so knitting. I, as I mentioned, have been a very monogamous knitter. I have been working almost exclusively on my Tegna sweater. Make sure I don't lose all my sleeve stitches. Okay. Here it is. It's a sweater. Oh, I absolutely love it. I'm so happy with it. It fits like a dream. I've put it on. I have my first sleeve finished. I'm just working on my second sleeve. And then all I need to do is weave in the ends and block it, and it will be ready to wear. Oh, I'm so excited. I love this sweater. It fits like a dream. Oh, I just love it. So the details. This is Sweet Sparrow Yarns, my hummingbird base, which is 50% non-superwash merino and 50% silk in my blackberry mousse colorway. I am knitting, what size am I knitting? Hold on. Okay, I am knitting the size that gives you 48¼ inches finished bust circumference. I wear a 38D bra, so at the fullest part of my bust, it's 42 inches around. So the 48¼ inch size gives me enough room to get that sort of drapey, casual look of the Tegna pattern, but it's not so big that it becomes an unflattering shape on me. So, win-win. It fits really well. I've tried it on. I did lengthen the sleeves. Instead of doing a short sleeve, I did a 3/4 length sleeve. And going back to the sizing for a moment, several people had commented on the Tegna that the arms came out quite tight, which is part of the look of the pattern. It's supposed to have a fuller, boxier body with tighter sleeves, but I didn't think that would be something I'd be terribly comfortable with. So what I did was I continued knitting flat back and forth on the front panel for this amount of length recommended in the next size up in the pattern. I was just checking my notes to make sure I'm giving you the right information. So I believe, let's see, this poor pattern, it looks like it's been through a war. Look at this thing. How did that happen? So that ended up with me knitting 3/4 more length here, which is where the drop shoulder attaches to the arm. Then the pattern recommended for my size, I followed the next size up, so that I could do the sleeve from the next size up, which worked out beautifully. It was a very easy fix to something that I didn't think I would be thrilled with. I'm very happy with how that turned out. I think it was the right modification for the pattern to work well on my body, and to ensure that I will actually wear the finished object. And plenty of you recommended either ChiaoGoo or Haya needles for sleeve needles. I did go ahead and purchase a ChiaoGoo 12-inch circular needle for my sleeve knitting, and it has made knitting the sleeves much less fussy than it was to do them with Magic Loop. So thank you very much. I also wanted to mention on the neckline of this sweater, the pattern just tells you to bind off the stitches knitwise when you are binding off for the rolled neckline. But after I did that, I found that my bind off, even though I bound off on a larger needle size, did not actually allow for the neck to roll. It held it too tightly in place. So I unpicked that bind off and did Jenny's surprisingly stretchy bind off, which did allow me to get a really nice rolled neckline. There's a bit of something odd happening over here, but I think that'll be fine once it's blocked, and if not, the rolled neckline will hide it a little anyway. It's fine. So that's my Tegna. I'm going to be going home to my mom's house for Easter weekend, and I'll actually be leaving later this afternoon for that. And I'm not going to bring my Tegna with me because it's just too big of a project to really travel with at this point, and I think I would finish the sleeve fairly quickly and then run out of knitting. So I'm actually going to be casting on a new project. This is my Alma colorway. It was one inspired by Deadwood. It's a sort of grayed out moss green with speckles of deep burgundy and brown in it. This camera's really determined to see my pillow as a face. There. You get the idea. So I will be casting this on into a pair of Clark socks, and they will be for my mom's flute teacher. Her birthday is in the beginning of May, but my mom will actually see her on April 14th, which means that I need to get a hustle on with these socks. So that's what I'll do. I'm going to be knitting the Clark Socks by Jacqueline Salem, which I'm super excited about because it's a pattern that I absolutely love. I loved knitting the pattern when I made my first go at it. I was knitting it with Hedgehog Fibers sock yarn in the opaline colorway, and I took the advice of pretty much everyone who commented about it on my last episode, and I just went ahead and ripped out that sock. I love the pattern. I do not enjoy working with the yarn. It is too splitty for me, so I'm going to wait for a pattern that speaks to me for that yarn that uses a larger needle size and is not cabled. But I'm really excited to cast on some Clark socks and have a really positive experience with them because this is my nuthatch base, which is probably my favorite base to make gift socks out of, just because it's a 75-25 blend, it's a 4-ply, so it's long wearing, and it's hard for someone who isn't a knitter to mess up caring for these socks because they really don't require any care. I just throw all of my, which to be honest, I throw all of my hand knit socks into the washing machine and dryer. Knit truth. Yeah, I'm really excited to start these. I actually need to cake this up before my mom gets here. She is picking me up and we are going to go and do a little shopping together, and then we will pick up my brother at the train station and head to my mom's house. Okay, let's get into the Q&A portion of today's podcast. I'm pulling up the Instagram post. Okay, so as I mentioned in the Instagram post where I asked for any questions you might have, I'm not going to be going into specifics about my dyeing methods just because, you know, it's my livelihood. And they are methods that I've kind of worked to figure out and to make my yarn unique. And yeah, I think most dyers feel this way. I know that Laura from the Fawn Knits has said that she does not answer questions about specifically her dyeing methods or where she gets her fabrics, and I think that's completely reasonable, so I'm going to take that approach as well. But anything else is on the table. Okay, Angora Moose asks, "Hi Julie, I'm curious to hear about your inspiration. What mostly led you to dyeing yarn for a living?" Well, I did not initially intend to dye yarn for a living. I was planning on doing it as a hobby, and that was pretty much it. And then I realized how much I love doing it. And I thought, well, maybe this can be a self-sustaining hobby. Maybe this is something that I can just open an Etsy shop and it will pay for itself, and that'll be fine. That'll be plenty if that's all it does. And then I realized how passionate I was about it, and Many of you know that I had been working in the fashion industry before I changed to dyeing yarn full-time. And I think a big part of why I realized how much I loved dyeing yarn and running an Etsy shop was because there are aspects of it that are very different than the fashion industry, in that you really get to interact one-on-one with your customers, which you do not get to do in the fashion industry. You pretty much you make your product about 6 months before it's actually in the stores, so by the time anyone is buying it or wearing it, you've pretty much moved on. And I really like the immediacy of getting to speak with someone who just purchased their yarn. Oh, can you hear the birds outside? It's spring. Next question. Maria Elena Bliss says, I'm loving knitting my Tegna too. What yarn did you choose? Base and color. I chose Sweet Sparrow Yarn's Hummingbird Base in Blackberry Mousse. Julie Gooney says, I'd love to know more about your tattoos and if you have plans for more. I love talking about my tattoos. Good question, Julie Gooney. So I have 4 tattoos at the moment. I have a small green sewing button on my ankle. I have an acorn on my wrist. I have a sparrow sitting in raspberry branches and pear tree blossoms on my right thigh. And I have a knitting squirrel who is perched on blueberries with a curling fern to the side on my left thigh. Whew. So Zach decided to get his in black and white, and I got mine in color. And I absolutely love this tattoo. I wanted to get it somewhere that I would see it every single day, and it's really special to me. My third tattoo was my first large tattoo. That is my sparrow. I got this in October of 2016. Yeah, in October of 2016 I got my sparrow tattoo on my right thigh. Oh, I forgot to mention, my acorn tattoo was done at East River Tattoo in Brooklyn, and it was done by the artist Rachel Hauer. She's absolutely wonderful, and she also is a knitter and a quilter, so I would definitely suggest checking her out. My sparrow tattoo I got kind of as a symbol of feeling myself evolving toward a different future than the one I had planned. I had planned my whole life to be in the fashion industry, and then I got there and I realized that it was not for me. I loved being in school for fashion design, and I loved quite a bit of the work that I did in fashion, but the environment was not quite right for me. So I got my sparrow to symbolize moving more toward Sweet Sparrow yarns, and the plants on it, the raspberries, I have black raspberries and red raspberries, as well as raspberry leaves and a branch of a pear tree with blossoms on it. So every year my family and I would all pick the raspberries and the pears from our raspberry bushes or raspberry canes and the pear tree in my parents' yard. And I just have such clear memories of seeing the pear tree in bloom and seeing all these gorgeous white blossoms. It just looked like a giant cake or something, or like it was covered in little white butterflies, because the blossoms were so beautiful and so numerous that the entire tree just looked white. It was really gorgeous and one of my favorite memories. And then my knitting squirrel tattoo. Both of these tattoos on my thighs were done by the same artist, They were done by Maria Leone. She is based in Chile, but she comes to New York quite frequently and guest artists at tattoo studios. So my knitting squirrel, this was a little bit of a, not really spur of the moment because I knew what I wanted for the subject matter of the tattoo, but it all came together a bit quickly because Maria announced that she was going to be in New York. I actually did not see her Instagram post about it for several days, and I was almost certain that she would be booked up because I couldn't imagine that she would have any time slots left. She's an amazing artist. But I love squirrels. I think they're so cute, and they're so they're both industrious and cheerful, and I think that's a really good way to try to live my life. And I wanted it to be knitting because I love how their little paws look like little clever hands. And then it is perched on blueberries, again another plant that grew in the field by my parents' house, and I have very happy memories of running up to the field barefoot and in my nightgown to go see if there were any blueberries that my brother and I could pick for my mom to make pancakes. And then the fern is to symbolize my Aunt Fern. She's, I guess she's not technically my aunt by blood, but she is one of my other aunts, my Aunt Annie's best friends from childhood, and she's always been a part of my life. And she was very supportive of me getting into drawing and getting into the arts. I used to absolutely love when she would give me a drawing lesson at family get-togethers. And she just is such a kind person. Sorry about that, my camera ran out of battery. I believe I was talking about my Aunt Fern. So yeah, that explains why I have a fern in my tattoo. And I also have a little bumblebee in that tattoo as well. And I got that because not terribly long ago, I think it was last summer, I was visiting my mom, and there was this bee who had gotten caught in the rain, and it was sitting on her porch railing, and I was very nervous about it. I wasn't sure if it would be able to fly, so it was just laying there for a while, and I didn't want to bother it. It gradually got dry, and it started grooming itself almost exactly like a cat, which I thought was so sweet. Just grooming its little front legs and its middle legs and its back legs, and nudging its wings with its little face, and it was just so sweet. And then he was able to fly away once the rain had stopped, and I was so happy. My next question is from Sarah D. Bullock, and she says, I would love to hear the story about how you and Jacqueline became friends. So Jacqueline and I have actually talked about this because this is a question that she gets fairly often as well. And I think what we're going to do, there's a motorcycle outside, I hope that's not too loud. I think what Jacqueline and I are going to do is to film a little segment together and talk about how each of us remembers becoming friends. So that will be coming soon. Minnie Mobius asks, have you ever been on a yarn diet, and how did it go? I'm on a yarn diet, fell off the wagon once already, and it's been painful. Very, very painful. Well, I guess it's not as much of an issue for me now because as a dyer, all of my my first try skeins for new colorways to get an idea of how to make them look the way that I want them, those all end up in my stash. I'm going to see if I can zoom out a little more. This seems really close. Okay, hopefully that's not too different than it was before. So I just don't buy a lot of yarn because my stash is very large. I really have a lot of yarn. I find that I am a stress purchaser, so if there's a lot of stress in my life, that's when I want to buy things, mostly yarn. so I try to keep my stress level pretty low, with mixed success. But I don't know that I've ever gone on like a serious yarn diet, so I don't really have a lot of tips for you. Sorry. Jacqueline Salem asks, how do you work through creative blocks? I have found that for me, the best way to work through a creative block is to pause, because I've found that when I try to force creativity, it doesn't work. That is not something that works for me. I kind of need to let it happen organically, or it doesn't happen at all. So I generally will stop and take a little break, do a little knitting, do some yoga, go on a walk. I have a lot of really lovely books about art and about fabrics and just a lot of creative inspiration. So generally I will stop what I'm doing and put it down, because you can't undo something once it's done, and I would rather step away for a little while and then come back and get the result that I'm really looking for. Bed of Roses asks, she says, I really enjoyed the part when you tell about podcasts. I laughed when you told that you managed to scare yourself after listening to that Ghost Stories podcast in the evening. I really did, and you know what? I haven't learned my lesson. I still do it. It's such a bad idea. I scare myself silly every time, but I can't resist. I hope you have something to tell about that. So if you missed that, that was the podcast, and that's why we drink. And funny stories from your daily life would also be a winner. I'm curious about the base you've chosen for your tegna, drape, feel, etc. I'm thinking of knitting a tegna, a little customized version. I'm always looking forward to a new episode. It is always so nice to listen to your voice while I work and do my stuff. Thank you so much, Catherine. That's so sweet of you. I will tell you a story from my daily life. And this is, if I had to sum myself up in one story, I think this would probably be it. So just the other day, I went to get a lime out of my refrigerator, and I had put away my stuff from dinner very quickly and impatiently the night before. So there was a tub of Pecorino Romano cheese that was very precariously perched. I don't know why I didn't just take the 2 seconds it would have taken to push it further back on the shelf, but I didn't. So this tub of cheese starts falling out of the refrigerator. I managed to catch it, but in catching it, I also managed to trip over my own feet and go rear over tea kettle, shall we say, onto the floor, landed on my back. The lid came off the cheese, and so I'm laying there on my kitchen floor, covered in grated cheese. It was like defying the laws of physics. I don't know how much cheese managed to come out of that little tub. But, of course, my cats, you know, the second they hear the refrigerator opening, they're already on high alert. And so my cats come in. I'm like trying to clean up and get all this cheese off of me, but I'm laughing so hard over this stupid situation that I can barely move. And so that is the story of how I ended up laying on my kitchen floor with my cats eating cheese off of me. So there's your daily life story. As for the drape of my tegna, I think that the 50% silk base of my hummingbird base works really well, because it gives it a lot of drape, and also because to me it makes it a 3-season sweater. I will probably be wearing this in spring, fall, and winter. I probably won't wear it in the heat of summer, just because my apartment gets quite warm in summer as well, because I live on the 4th floor of a 4-story building. But I think the drape shows off the lace beautifully. Overall, I would definitely recommend a silk blend for this top. Next question. Mountain Girl Knits says, I'm fairly new to knitting and wonder how I can keep sock yarn from twisting up horribly while knitting. It gets so frustrating having yarn wrapped up on itself. I completely agree. So the first thing that's going to determine this is how you're knitting your socks. I knit my socks one at a time on two 16-inch circular needles, and I don't generally find that my yarn twists too much. I also cake my yarn and pull from the center of the cake. It can be a little bit difficult to work with at first because there's so much pressure on the outside of the cake pushing inward, and it can make it hard to get that middle section to flow out smoothly. So I actually pinch about an inch of yarn in the center of the cake and pull that out, so I have like a little mini cake from the center of the larger cake. And then I knit from that, and by the time I get through that, there's not so much pressure on the inside of the larger cake, and the yarn can flow out smoothly. Granted, the likelihood of tangling is perhaps a little bit more when you pull from a center pull ball, but to me it's worth that risk because the ease of knitting is so much better, in my opinion, from a center pull. If you are knitting your socks two at a time, I don't have a lot of experience with that, but I would highly recommend that you look at Mina Phillips' tutorial for how she knits her socks two at a time, because I know that when she's knitting, she turns her needles one way for the front, when she's moving from the front of the sock to the back of the sock, and then reverses it and turns them the other way when she's moving from the back of the sock to the front of the sock. So that way her yarn is only ever going this way to this way and then this way to this way, and it doesn't end up going, ooh, my arm doesn't bend that way. It doesn't end up going in a circle and getting a lot of twist built up in it, which can lead to it tangling up. Molly Klein Design, hi Molly, says, what are your favorite knits and how is your beekeeper's hexapuffs coming along? My favorite knits. I would say my favorite knit at the moment might be my Grace cardigan. It's knit out of Quince & Company Finch in the Carrie's yellow colorway, and it has little buttons on it made of tree branches. You can see that in my last episode if you'd like more information on that. But I also love my, what is it? Oh, so many fades, I can't think of the right name. My Find Your Fade shawl. I wear that a lot. I think those are probably my favorites. As for my beekeeper's quilt, let me show you guys. Okay, I started this in 2012. These are all of the puffs that are currently attached. If you'll notice, so the way the beekeeper's quilt is put together is that you fasten it with little ties at each corner of your hexapuffs. Each of these little hexagonal things is called a hexapuff. So I decided to use a rayon blend yarn that I had because I didn't think I would use it for anything else, and I thought, well, I'll use it for ties. That was not a good decision because the rayon blend yarn is very slippery and the ties have come untied in a lot of places. So I do need to go in and fix that. Hello. I need to fix that, and I think I'm going to use Bergère de France for that because it is a superwash yarn, but it has quite a toothy texture and I think it will hold better. And then I'll grab my apothecary jar of hexapuffs to show you. So I have probably around 20 more hexapuffs done that I keep in this jar. I would like to add more hexapuffs to my beekeeper's quilt. I don't know that it's ever going to be a full blanket because it's not very drapey. The stuffing makes it quite thick, and perhaps not quite the best for a true blanket because it doesn't drape. But who knows? I just put it over my leg and it is quite cozy. Well, it'll be a long-term project. I would actually like to get back to knitting these though. They're very quick, and especially because I've been gravitating more, I can't help it, now I'm playing with all the hexapuffs. Especially because I've been gravitating more toward sweaters and large shawls and big projects. Sometimes you need just a little pick-me-up of an instant gratification knit, and the hexapuffs are definitely instant gratification. So, how many should I aim for? Maybe I'll aim to knit 4 a week. I think that's doable. Let's go for that. Jennifer Kirschner, I am going to save your question for next time because it's about my stash, and I'm going to film a little stash tour for you guys. Don't judge me. No, I'm just kidding. I know you guys won't judge. I know you're all in the same boat. So I'm going to answer one last question because my battery light is flashing again, and I would really like to get this edited and uploaded before I leave for my mom's house, just because I have very fast internet and I would like to get it uploaded from here if possible. Okay, so the last question I will answer today is from E. Klieger. Hello, Betsy. What are the biggest challenges you face as a creative person running a business? I know it's a broad question. I think my biggest challenge in running a business as a creative person is work-life balance. I think because I came from an industry where being constantly very busy and very stressed and constantly having so much to do is sort of worn as a badge of honor. I definitely picked up a little bit of that workaholic type of attitude, which is not really a great thing. I've always had a really strong work ethic, but it can be difficult for me to know when it is time for me to stop and take care of myself. It's not always a bad thing. As some of you know, probably not many, I really haven't mentioned this much of anywhere, but I went through a really rough breakup from the end of February through the beginning of March. It was something that I was hoping I could avoid, but in the end I felt like it was the only option that I had left. So I'm not going to get too much into that, but that's the reason that's relevant is because these sort of workaholic tendencies really got me through that breakup. It kept my mind occupied to be constantly having something to do and something to work on. But at the same time, it's not always great because I don't take the best care of myself. It's something I'm working on and really trying to get better at, but I do tend to put off my own self-care. There's a truck outside. So yeah, I'm really working on getting better at balancing that out, but that is definitely my biggest hurdle going along kind of with that. I've been pretty open about this, but I have hypothyroidism, so my thyroid basically is useless. It just hangs out in there doing nothing. It's a freeloader. I recently got blood test results back that told me that my thyroid is actually getting even less active as I get older, which sucks. I was happy to find it out because it explains why I had been feeling so exhausted. But it can be difficult because stress is something that makes my particular symptoms of hypothyroidism a lot worse. and it can be difficult to avoid having a lot of stress when you run your own business. But I really would not trade it for the world. I'm so much happier now than I was in a corporate environment, and it's brought me into this amazing community. So I'm very grateful that I get to do what I love every day. So I'm going to say goodbye for now, and then I'm going to try to get this edited and uploaded before I leave. And I will continue answering your questions in the next episode in 2 weeks. Bye. Oh, hold on. My mom's calling. Hi. Good. You're on the podcast.
Oh, sorry. Bye.
Oh, no, that's okay. It's not live. I can edit it out. What's up?
I just want to let you know I'm leaving the house now. I took that around 6 in Hoboken.
Oh, perfect.
Okay?
Yes.
All right. Talk to you later, honey.
Talk to you later. I love you.
Love you too. Bye.
Bye. So that was my mom.